Hey, this is Scott, and today I'm going to take a look at the feiyu-tech A2000. The A2000 is a mid-range gimbal for mirrorless cameras and DSLRs, priced right around the cost of the popular Zhiyun Crane V2. It does hold a bit more weight than the V2 though, up to 2,500 grams, and it comes with all the parts you could want, like 2 sets of batteries, a mini tripod, and dual handles that actually have electronic contacts, which connect to the gimbal, allowing for built-in buttons and controls identical to the single handle grip. Generally, it seems to do its job fairly well, but there are a handful of things that I felt were so very close to being great, but just a little bit off. It is a pretty great deal for the price though, so you'll have to decide if these things are deal breakers or not. Starting off, I'll give you a general introduction to what this is and go over what you're getting in this kit. It comes in a pretty nice semi-hard case with cutouts that fit every one of the range of parts that you'll get with this. For the relatively compact size of this case, it fits quite a lot, including the dual handles. So a quick rundown of what is actually included in here: the main gimbal, the single handle, the dual handle, a mini tripod, a Manfrotto compatible tripod plate, a lens support adapter for the tripod plate, screws for both the lens support and the tripod plate itself, 2 sets of batteries, a battery charger, a USB cable for the battery charger, a cold shoe, cables for a number of cameras, and instructions. The case itself has a divider that holds all of these parts in place so they don't fall out, and that's held in place by 3 Velcro straps, and there's a zippered mesh pocket in the top half of the case, which is a nice touch. Taking a look at what you have on the single handle: a joystick, a power on and off button, which also functions as a mode changing button. This button will toggle between pan follow and lock modes with a single push, and enter full follow mode with a double push. 3 pushes will turn the gimbal around 180 degrees, 4 pushes will enter auto rotation mode, and 5 pushes will start initialization. A shutter button, this only works if you're connected to a compatible camera, and a trigger button on the back to temporarily enter full lock mode, or you can return to home position with a double tap. There's a 1/4-inch mounting point on the left side, a USB connection on the right side, and you have a rubber yet smooth grip that's only slightly more grippy than the smooth metal of the Zhiyun gimbals. The bottom half unscrews to let you put in 2 of the 4 included batteries, which are estimated to run for about 6 hours each. Finally, you have a 1/4-inch screw thread on the bottom, as you would usually expect from this kind of gimbal. Looking at the dual handles, the joystick, buttons, and trigger are all exactly the same as on the single handle. This can fold in on itself for compact storage, and it has 2 small twisting screws at the center to lock it in place when it's opened. There are 9 1/4-inch mounting points on here, including on the top of each handle, making it super easy to attach things like a microphone or a small LED light. The shape of these handles allow it to stand on its own fairly well when it's set down, so you don't need the mini tripod. You also have an identical rubber texture to the single handle, and the left dual handle unscrews to allow you to put the 2 batteries in, and the 4 supplied batteries mean you can have batteries loaded in both this and the single handle at the same time, or you can always have a backup. Finally, getting to the gimbal itself, there's a Manfrotto style tripod plate included with a quick release on the base of the gimbal. The plate, as well as the arms of the gimbal, are ribbed or bumpy on one side, supposedly to help avoid slipping out of place, but honestly it just makes it a bit more annoying to make small adjustments to the balance. The plate has a short space running down the front half where you could have free adjustment of the screw, and a number of single holes at the back. There are slots where the lens support bracket fits in on the front as well. The quick release on the base of the gimbal tightens in an up and down direction, not side to side, and the loose bracket can sometimes get in the way of the plate sliding on smoothly, so if you're having trouble with that, just check here. The entire quick release base itself can also slide left and right to fit different size cameras. Looking at the bottom, the screw to slide the plate itself left and right is at the rear, while the quick release screw is on the right side, closer to the motor. Be careful not to mix these up, as it can be easy. While the screws at the bottom of the quick release plate have a kind of wingnut type shape, all of the other screws are small and round, but textured to make them a little bit easier to grip. They are small though, so for some people they might be a little bit tricky at times. There are measurements marked on the arms if you want to remember the position, which can be useful because, as with all gimbals, you'll likely need to reset the position to fit this back into the case. The actual gimbal attaches to the single and dual handles with a twisting lock, and there are some contacts in between there. You'll want to make sure to keep these clean. There are 4 pins that will help you align the parts when you're connecting them, and for the most part, this seems to work pretty well. Of course, the performance of a gimbal like this is one of the major factors, and no matter how much stuff they include and what great functions it might have, if the performance isn't there, it's just not worth it. Luckily, I was fairly pleased with this. It does feel a little bit more susceptible to bad walking technique, affecting your footage more than some of the larger and more robust gimbals, but if you're careful with how you walk and how you hold it and you don't expect miracles, you can definitely get some really nice footage from this. I'd highly recommend going into the app and adjusting some of the parameters like the dead zone and the follow speed, because they were a little bit sensitive out of the box and you could see every little movement. Once these are adjusted to a point that's responsive enough, but not so much that it's jumping with every little movement, you can really get the best out of this system. I tested this out with a Panasonic GH4 and a 12-35 f2.8 lens, as well as a Canon 5D Mark IV using both the Laowa 12mm and the Canon 16-35 f4 lenses. There wasn't much of a difference between the GH5 and the 5D Mark IV overall, but again, if you're not careful of how you walk or run, there is some noticeable wobbling. It may be slightly worse than others, but not so much that I wouldn't recommend this based just on that alone. Just be careful how you walk. I should also note that it performed just as well when my camera was slightly unbalanced from zooming out my lens. It was a minor shift since the 16-35 zooms internally, but the weight does still shift, and after turning off the motors, you could see that it wasn't perfectly balanced anymore. Even though slightly unbalanced at 35mm, it performed as well as any other time that I was using it. My one and only significant disappointment in terms of performance and results was the lock mode. Simply put, it doesn't perfectly lock in place. Generally speaking, it will be locked, but it can drift off center and sometimes it just totally twitches bit by bit in one direction while you hold it still. I have initialized this a few times and my firmware is up to date, but the problem is still there. I ended up using this almost exclusively in full follow mode and occasionally pan follow, which is a shame because their trigger temporary lock mode is a big selling point. The app is simple and functional, yet missing a few things that I would like, such as more in-depth calibration. There is a manual horizon calibration, which actually does have the potential to be more accurate than an automated process, but that's it. My A2000 actually is slightly off in the pan axis, and I'd love to have manual correction of that be possible as well. You can initialize your gimbal by pressing the mode button 5 times and placing it down on a flat surface, but it's not as in-depth of a calibration process as some others, even smartphone gimbals. Other things like the adjustments for motor strength and speed are simple and easy to use, but sometimes the app can be a little bit slow to respond and you accidentally push save 5 times before the saving box pops up and you can get 4 error messages after the initial save finished. The remote control also seems to work just fine, and there are a few places in the app that you can see some on-screen instructions or frequently asked questions, but they're not so easy to understand. The auto rotation mode settings are a bit confusing until you play around with them a bit, just because of their wording, but after you get through that, they're pretty straightforward. I've already hinted at a few of my opinions while going over the different parts of this gimbal, but now I just want to go more into my overall thoughts on the system. I really like the interchangeable single and dual handles. It helps to keep it compact and simple and allows you to have buttons built right into the dual handles, no need for additional accessories or drastically moving your grip to get control of things. I like that the buttons and the joystick on the dual handles exactly mirrors that on the single handle. If you get used to using that layout, then it makes going back and forth a breeze. Some people have mentioned that their position on the dual handles makes it a little bit tricky to use them, but I disagree. They're not perfect, but I think it would be impossible to make buttons and a joystick built into a grip that are perfectly accessible yet don't get in the way and cause you to accidentally push them. This works just fine for me, and I strongly prefer it over having no buttons or needing an extra attachment. It's fairly small and lightweight overall. With a case that holds all of this, even the dual handles, it makes the whole system very portable. I like that the case has a zippered pocket for some small extras you might want to bring, like filters. I appreciate that there are enough batteries supplied to either keep a pair in both the single and dual handles, or have a backup pair if you only plan to use one of these handles. The overall life of these batteries could be a bit longer to compete with other gimbals, but I honestly have never used a gimbal like this for more than 6 hours of shooting in a day. Either way, there are 2 sets here. There are tons of mounting points, especially on the dual handles, but even on the single handle you get an extra screw thread on the side, which is perfect for a magic arm with an LED light or a microphone attached to the included cold shoe. The dual handles standing on their own is also really nice. It's always nice to set down a gimbal like this because you can get tired, and it just makes it very easy without needing anything else attached. I'm able to use this with the dual handles in briefcase mode, which is really quite comfortable to hold it down low. Of course, you can use the single handle or the dual handles in inverted mode as well, but this gives you a bit more of a comfortable grip in some situations. The quick lock mode that you can access by holding the trigger button on the back is surprisingly useful. It's nice to just jump in and out of that mode without having to fully switch anything. The one problem with that is, as I mentioned, the lock mode's performance needs some attention in the next firmware update. The rubber grip is a great attempt, but it still remains pretty slippery. If they just went with a more rubbery rubber, it would be perfect. The bumpy design of the gimbal arms, and more so the tripod plate, can be quite annoying. It still works and I get their thought process there, but it can be annoying. The connection between the handle and the gimbal has worked fine for me, but I wish there were better, perhaps screw-on caps for when your gimbal is not in use. I've heard that these contacts being even slightly dirty can obviously interfere with the functioning of the gimbal, but the rubber caps often fall off, and even in the case. Especially since the batteries are in the grip, faulty contacts could mean that the gimbal can't even retain power if there's an issue. Again, I haven't personally had a problem at all, but better caps really could help prevent it from happening to anyone. Similar to the feiyu-tech Gimbal 2 for smartphones that I recently reviewed, I feel that the motors here are a little bit soft or loose compared to some other gimbals that I've tried. Depending on your walking technique, it can or cannot have an effect on your video, but if you're careful, it seems to be pretty much fine. The ability to quickly move into the lock mode by holding the trigger is great, but that means you already have quick access to that mode. Logically, I would assume that a single press of the mode button would therefore allow you to switch quickly between the pan follow mode and full follow modes, while a double tap would still give you the ability to fully jump into that lock mode. Since you have access to it already, lock mode being accessed by the slightly less inconvenient single tap seems like the logical choice, leaving you with quick access to all three of the modes, either with a single tap of the mode button or by holding the trigger on the back. It's not the case though. A single tap will toggle between pan follow and full lock modes, and you have to double tap the mode button to enter full follow mode. It's far from what I would consider a problem, but it just doesn't seem logical. This is the kind of thing that could be updated with a firmware update, or hopefully even be customized per user using some future version of the app. So feiyu-tech, if you're listening, get on that. I already mentioned the lock mode issue, so that's one other of these negative things, and just again, that's something that hopefully they can address in a future firmware update, but as of now, that is kind of annoying. This may be just me, but again, my home position is not perfectly centered from what you would consider to be the center if you're looking at the joysticks and the button on the back of the handle. I would expect the home position to be straight out from that position, but for me it's just a bit off to the side. The single handle, it's not really an issue because you can just twist it a bit, but using the dual handles it becomes much more noticeable since you have that going off in either direction. You can still use the joystick to reposition it or even do it manually by hand, but it's something that I don't feel should need to be done. Again, I have calibrated this, but it didn't fix the problem. Vibration can sometimes be an issue with this gimbal. While it should hold up to 2,500 grams, I noticed with a 5D Mark IV and 16-35 f4 lens, total of around 1,500 grams, that vibration was worse than with the lighter GH4 and the 12-35. The motors are supposed to have an auto calibration effect to adjust their strength as needed, but this kind of makes me doubt it a bit. You can make some adjustments in the app as well to the motor strength, and this did seem to help a little bit. I noticed the vibrations the most when in inverted mode and also while holding the single handle grip with only one hand. It seems completely irrelevant how many hands I'm holding it with, but with one hand it would vibrate like crazy, and when I grabbed it with a second hand on the closed up tripod underneath, the vibrating would stop. Very strange. I don't know why this happens, and surprisingly it doesn't really seem to interfere with the footage very much as long as you take care of your technique in walking. So, as a fairly affordable gimbal including a nice case, dual handles with built-in buttons, and 2 sets of batteries, this is definitely not bad. It does have its issues, but it's totally possible to work around nearly all of them. I did enjoy using this quite a lot, and it's hard to say if I'd recommend it or not. There's a lot of competition these days in this market, and if there wasn't, maybe I would have no problem saying this will work great for you. However, that's not the case. There is a lot of competition, and I think feiyu-tech should rework some of these issues so they can really come out on top, because they have a lot of potential. For now, I'd probably go with around 3.5 out of 5 stars. If you have any questions or comments, let me know down below and I will definitely get back to you. If you liked this video or found it helpful, don't forget to give me a thumbs up, share it if you'd like, subscribe, and as always, thank you for watching.